A, B. Like, there's not even a thing in the. A Simple Choice by David Pepper. It's a mystery book, political thriller, style of short chapters. Kept the pacing really well. All the chapters, I think the maximum of all the chapters was like 6 pages. So it meant each time you were swapping a lot between all the POVs, and it kept the action and the plot moving forwards at a very fast speed. Now, this has its pros and cons, especially. Cons are that the characters in this book are mostly irrelevant. Like, a lot of them don't really matter. In fact, a lot of the POV chapters, especially at the start of the book, when you don't actually know anything about what's going on in the plot, perhaps they're in there to like build suspense or like build a little context, hint at certain things. But I'm like, a lot of the first part of the book could probably be cut and the plot would still function. And I don't think much would be missed because, as one of the cons of this really fast pacing, a lot of the characters just aren't very well developed and you don't have a connection with any. Everything flows in a logical way. All the events that happen in the book, it makes sense. It's like, logically, this causes this, and then this is plausible, and then this leads to another thing. And finally, you all get to the final twist. And I like the ending as well. Perhaps a little telegraphed with certain things in the book, but I think the ending was good, wrapped up a lot of loose ends, and gave a lot of finality, actually, to straight up the main character of the story. There are two main characters in this book, Amity and Palmer, but really Palmer isn't a main character. Like, I think everybody who reads this book can probably agree that Amity is the main character because, I mean, she's the one that we know all the backstory and a lot of focus on her trying to help her mom, and she's the one that we have the most emotional connection because, especially them, the author David Pepper describing the relationship between her and her mom. I think that is the emotional draw that us, the reader, are supposed to have. Why we're supposed to feel for any of these characters. Because really, Palmer, even though he is kind of labeled also as the main character, especially in like the synopsis of the book, really not a lot of development was done on him. So even when the stakes were high and we're supposed to like empathize with him, especially in that part where he's like getting trapped by the senator and was actually gonna die but gets rescued, like, the whole reason we empathize and like, oh no, we don't want him to die is not really because of him himself. It's only because he's connected with Amity and they're both like working towards the same goal, right? So, especially as I said before, with all of the very fast pacing and short chapters, we don't get a lot of prolonged time with each character like in one scene, which means we don't get a lot of time and opportunities to see each character in a more developed way and perhaps empathize with them. So almost all of the other characters, like the senators that we're supposed to empathize with, like Gigi Fox, who became like a mainstay, I mean, they do a lot of description actually through Amity's POVs by talking about her backstory, and a lot of these chapters where it is from her POV, they're basically talking like, oh, she had this long service, this career of public service, and she's gone through all of this, and this touching relationship that she has with her fellow senators and her husband. But throughout all of that, it's just all so short that you don't feel extremely connected to the stories. I think that's the con of the short chapters. But as I said, I really like how fast everything went because it meant that once you like started and the plot started slowly unraveling, once basically Amity like started following the van and all the events that happened after that, I think that's when the plot really picked up. The ending, I like. I've said in a lot of these reviews, if you're a big fan of these thriller mystery stuff, you probably can see the ending. And before it was even revealed, I kind of knew with how much they were pushing the president that the president had to play a bigger role in this. So she was probably going to be like a villain in a surprise plot twist. So I like that ending, but still some confusing loose ends or things I feel like the author David Pepper could have fleshed out at the end a little bit more, like what happened to the senators. Also, like how exactly, so one thing that I was confused about was they were trying to build it as the senators were like the cabal behind this whole research thing, right? They were working with Blackwood, the doctor, and they were kind of the whole people behind it. But then when the twist came, we figured out it was the president. So how much were the senators actually involved? Like, were they actually bad guys, or were they coerced by the president, or were they like doing their own separate thing, and the president was actually even more genius and like keeping herself out of it? It was I feel like the senator's role, in a way, I mean, definitely was a red herring because the twist was that the president was like the first person, but I would have wanted a little more explanation on like actually how much were the senators involved in making this whole thing happen. Plot 4.5 out of 5. Pacing 4.5 out of 5. Ending 4 out of 5. Characters 3 out of 5. Overall, I'd say 4 out of 5.